Last Sunday, I visited Harrods and inevitably found myself in the watch section of the store. After browsing around the ground floor, I went down to the basement area. If you're unfamiliar with the layout, it's where there are effectively concessions from various watch brands, as opposed to the more elaborate, dedicated shop fronts within Harrods, which is how the larger brands present. I actually went down there to have a browse and see if there were any Laurent Ferrier watches for sale. Whilst I was there, a sales assistant honed in on me and we got talking. For what it's worth, it turns out that there aren't any Laurent Ferrier watches in the store. In fact, this sales chap hadn't ever heard of the brand. And instead, because we happened to be standing in front of a cabinet with a display of Bremonts, we got talking about Bremont. "Do you know about Bremont watches?" he asked me. "Yes, a little," I said, "but tell me about them." His response filled me with dismay. He didn't talk to me, as I'd expected, about the brand, what it stood for, the Britishness, air, land and sea. There was no take-it-further adventure story. Instead, he hurriedly told me that there was a deal on offer. "Oh," I asked, "what deal is that?" "Well," he replied, "as of this morning, if you buy a Bremont watch, along with the watch you get picked up, enjoy a stay in a 5-star hotel, and also a tour of the manufacturing facility in Henley. All expenses paid." "What do you think?" he asked. The first thing that came to mind also came out of my mouth. "Doesn't that sound a bit desperate?" I asked. He lowered his voice and replied, "Yeah, I think it is." I was incredulous. Had I not personally heard this firsthand, I'm not sure that I would have believed it were true. After leaving Harrods, I couldn't help but replay this conversation back to myself over and again. Did that really just happen? Quite aside from my interaction with the sales assistant not being what I'd expect in Harrods, the sheer brand destruction for Bremont. Oof. I found myself wincing while shaking my head, eyes closed, palm to face. It's just so awful. I'm not convinced that I know whether there are specific watches to which this offer applies. None were mentioned and there wasn't anything written. So if there was a nuance to this offer, I didn't stick around long enough to hear it. Financially, I'm guessing that the offer probably costs Bremont £500 or £600, which must be a significant chunk out of the bottom line. Overall, it just leaves me feeling sad. I was reminded of the H1 generation launch at the Tower of London in October 2022, 3 years ago, and the direction of travel that Bremont were heading at the time. It was exciting and new and a step change for the brand. Not long after that, Bremont secured tens of millions of dollars in funding from Bill Ackman. I was personally delighted for both Nick and Giles English, and also for Bremont and everything it stood for. Here was an opportunity to scale up and to take the brand forward. It all felt like things were coming together and it was very progressive. Davide Serrato was recruited as a result of the new money coming in, and I first met him at my initial visit to Watches and Wonders in Geneva. In particular, I recall the eagerness with which I'd visited the Bremont stand that year in April 2024. Excited to see the novelties being introduced by the then new CEO in his big reveal. I left Watches and Wonders that year somewhat confused and with mixed emotions. A brand that I knew and loved had completely changed, its identity, its direction, and I found myself unsure about how my relationship with Bremont would unfold from there. Earlier this year at Watches and Wonders, it was more of the same. An all-new MB range which looked familiar yet different, but there was a clear break from the Nick and Giles era and a completely new impetus and range of watches that I just didn't recognize as being Bremonts. In particular, the Jumping Hour, the Tourbillon and the Perpetual Calendar. In part, I think I understand how Davide is trying to commercialize the brand, but some of the newer watches he's introduced just don't make sense. At least not for the Bremont brand that I knew. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for change and for progress and invention, but I do draw a line at change for change's sake, and I fear that's what might be going on here. Take Bremont's perpetual calendar, for example. As far as I'm concerned, perpetual calendars are dress watches. They have intricate high horology complications, like tracking moon phases and leap years, all of which scream sophistication. Typically, they're encased in beautiful cases made of precious metal, thin enough so that they slip easily under the shirt cuff. To my mind, perpetual calendars are elegant watches. They're for boardrooms or black tie events, not field work. And yet, Bremont have produced this perpetual calendar in a titanium case and bracelet with a globe GMT function, date, month, and leap year complication that I needed a loop to read. They have bought in the movement, which is a manual wind. Again, that makes little sense to me, at least, beyond the wish to try and keep the watch from getting too thick. Its case depth is 12.65 millimeters. Bremont's website explains how the design of this watch is rooted in aviation utility and everyday wearability. But for me, it's a watch with identity issues, which is what I think the brand suffers from, as I shared in a previous video. And I think that's borne out in the sales figures. The top line of the most recent Bremont Watch Company Limited annual report for the year ending 30th of June 2024 tells a story. And out of idle curiosity, I'd be interested to see how the most recent 12 months to June of this year looks in comparison. These newer watches just don't appeal to me, which is all well and fine. Frankly, they don't need to, nor can any watch really appeal to everyone. My visit to the Bremont stand at Watches and Wonders in Geneva this year gave me the closure that I felt I needed. The whole experience left me coming away with an overwhelming sense of grief for the Bremont brand that I knew. And that was a feeling that was further reinforced earlier this week when I popped into the Bremont Mayfair boutique to collect my son's S302. It had needed a service and to be repaired after he went into the sea without ensuring the crown was properly screwed down. The invoice shows the address of the wing, Bremont's headquarters, which I noted is still called the Manufacturing and Technology Centre, in spite of the fact that Bremont doesn't manufacture any longer. Davide Serrato has done away with all the manufacturing equipment from the wing, and as far as I understand, it's now really a service centre and assembly facility. Whilst I was there, I asked to see the new jumping hour Terra Nova with the aventurine dial. I understand that it had just made its way back from Dubai Watch Week, and it appears to have been produced for a very particular market, given the sparkly dial and the frosted stainless steel case. It's a far cry from the MB tool watch range that I first fell for, and on that point, during Watches and Wonders, I inquired whether the new range of MB watches were being tested in the same way as the previous ones, by being ejected out of a cockpit of a plane. At the time, I was led to believe that they hadn't yet, and for a time, a part of me intended to follow up on this point, really just out of curiosity. Beyond an image of a pilot being ejected from a plane, Bremont's website doesn't really make reference to it, but their recently released Christmas video does make reference to being hurled from jets, propelled by G-forces. It's British engineering after all. So, on that basis, it must be true. But for me, I think it's now safe to say that I've moved on. And there we are. Bremont, as I knew it, feels like a chapter that's closed. I still have my old collection of Bremont watches. They're not going anywhere. And every time I wear one, I'm reminded of a time when the brand felt authentic, purposeful, and properly British in the best possible way. But the new direction, it's just not for me. And that's all right. Tastes change, brands evolve, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. If you're still excited by what Bremont is doing now, brilliant. Enjoy it. Life's too short for watch snobbery. As for me, I'll cherish the watches I've got and keep an eye from a distance. When grief passes, you move on, which is exactly what I've done.